All right, so before we hear from our speaker, Hassan Navid, the Director of the Office of the Prevention of Hate Crimes of New York City, I want to do a little framing. Margaret Della really led us into a very good space, an unusual space, the impact of hate. I'm just going to, I got back this morning at 5:10 a.m. from Israel, so I have not stopped yet. I admit I fell asleep on my grandchildren for about 15 minutes this evening, but we talk about trauma and hate, and we talk about the impact upon health. I met with a good friend of mine. She did a training for us, so I brought her an interfaith mission. She runs the Israel Trauma Coalition, and the impact of trauma on one's physical and certainly mental health is just tremendous. And according to, her name is Talia Lebanon, according to Talia, most people, 80% of the people, go through the trauma. It affects them. It does affect them. It does affect them physically. It does affect them mentally. They get over it. They're able to cope with it. And it doesn't mean you're stronger or less stronger. About 20% of the people really have serious side effects from the trauma of these kinds of whatever trauma is hitting you. But this kind of trauma, and the trauma of hate, is one that unfortunately we're experiencing in deeper and deeper ways in our city. I heard this morning, I was part of another Zoom earlier from the New York State Department of Human Rights, and someone who runs an organization out in Staten Island telling us how the immigrant populations out there, particularly those from Central America, are feeling traumatized all the time. And because they are consistently fearful of being deported at any one moment, however, they're consistently feeling the brunt of those, particularly those who have come across the border recently and have been placed out there for living arrangements by local people who live in Staten Island who are protesting against them all the time. Rather than welcoming, feeling welcome, they feel as though people do not want them there. I'm not going to make any political statements about it, yes or no. I have my feelings about it, but it does impact their physical and mental health. And unfortunately, they say that, and this is something, Hassan, I'm sure you're aware of, that there are consistent acts of hate against all these populations, and no one ever reports it. Because if they report it, they feel that they run the risk of being deported immediately. So Hassan and I know each other for quite some time. As I said, Hassan is the director of the Office of Prevention of Hate Crimes, and we have something called the PATH Partnership, Partners Against the Hate. There are, I believe, 6 partners, Hassan? Yes. Partners representing the Jewish, the Muslim, the LGBTQ community, the Latino community, the Asian community, and the Jewish community, of course. And all of them are deeply impacted by hate in our city. And just as I said, Margaret has suggested that we do a forum, and we will be doing the forum, but we wanted to get some baseline understanding of what does hate look like in our city, how prevalent is it, what's the difference between the hate incident and hate crime. So I could think of no better person to turn to and to give us that overview than Hassan Navid, a very dear friend, and someone that comforts me to know that he's on the journey with me. So let me just turn it over to Hassan.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Kaplan. And your words are so powerful and thoughtful, and I feel similarly as well. We have weathered so many storms over the last several years, and I've learned tremendously from you and the folks who've really been involved in a lot of these efforts for years. And so I appreciate your advice and your counsel all the time. And as Rabbi Kaplan said, the impact of these issues, they reverberate into communities themselves. The community trauma that's comes as a result of these incidents or these series of incidents, or they really have no border, right? It really has the ability to be able to really have this profound effect on communities. And we'll talk about how we'll talk about that in a second. I want to get into sort of what our office is, and then we'll go right back to sort of this mental health impact and how that fits into our office overall. And so OPHC was created in 2019, as Rabbi Kaplan had alluded. It's a newer office. And in that, we have three pillars that really drive the efforts of our office. And I just want to caveat this by saying that we are only two people, myself and Eunice. And we really, the strength of our programming is at community level, which is the Partners Against the Hate, which we'll talk about. But this office is created because we've seen an ongoing rise in hate. And hate crimes themselves and bias incidents. And it was important for the city of New York at 2019 to really take a position on saying, hey, we find this issue to be so important that we're going to create an office on this, a task force that's going to end up working towards addressing this so we can comprehensively approach this, right? Not just a one-way approach of things, but in every way possible. And so OPHC became that coordinating entity in that body. And it also served in very much ways of bringing those communities that are underreporting, and these are communities that may not feel comfortable going to the police to file a report because they might be concerned about their immigration status, or they might be concerned with their immigration status, or they may be in a situation where they've had bad relations with police in the past and they don't want to be able to report it, or they don't speak the language. There are a variety of factors. But that accounts for, I believe the Department of Justice said, more than half of the victims of hate crimes themselves. So we're only getting a partial picture of what things look like. And that's just talking about crimes, but this is also, that's just talking about crimes, but what about bullying and discrimination? What does the state of all this look like? And who's coordinating all this within the city itself? Because there are different city agencies that handle this. And so OPHC's mandate 2019, we have three pillars. And the first pillar, I mean, they're not in order, they're just simultaneously happening, but I'll start off with our first one, and that's the interagency coordination. And this is where the issue of mental health, the impact of it on communities themselves after an incident or a series of incidents have happened is so important, because we are working with city agencies, including the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, as well as the and gender-based violence and immigrant affairs, all these different mayoral offices and city agencies, to ensure that we are comprehensively approaching the issue. So if we're noticing an uptick of a particular crime in a city in a particular area, what does intervention look like outside of just us? Yes, we may need to momentarily increase police presence there for community safety, but what can we do in that particular zone, that area, and being able to intervene? Can we engage with the clergy, right, with faith leaders? And we have an office that's dedicated to that. Do we engage the NYCHA developments? What does that look like, right? Do we engage local police department? Do we engage with certain programs that we fund? So we're able to look at this through an approach that applies the public health lens and also the lens of social cohesion as well. And so of those, we have a number of organizations that we fund in this arena, and there are six, as Rabbi Kaplan said, and of those six, they fund other organizations that are smaller. The thing here is we wanted to be able to give opportunities to communities to also apply for funding that have historically not received it in the hate crime area, right? And so this is something that we're really happy that we fund over 70 organizations throughout the city on hate crimes, all the way from LGBTQ communities to Jewish communities, Muslim communities, immigrant communities. It is a very, very lengthy list, and it's a very comprehensive list. And those community organizations provide a variety of programs. It's not limited to just one size fits all, because everyone is on a different level of, what is it called, their lived experiences, right? Like one community may have the matter of immigration status as something that is a barrier to reporting, and that's where we would come in. And in reality, if you are in this city, if you are a victim of a hate crime, your immigration status does not matter. The NYPD is here to help. And the NYPD has made that clear, and we reiterate that. And we also engage with these organizations to facilitate this sort of information sharing that's happening. So this is the first time that city agencies came together and said, "What does this look like holistically, and how do we address this holistically?" Right. And so another project that came out of this interagency committee is hate crime lessons and curriculum that's going to be going into the schools, because DOE is part of this endeavor as well. And education happens to also be our second element. When City Council created this legislation, they mandated hate crime curriculum for us to create, and we have created that, and it's going to be part of the larger efforts of DOE, and it's in the next few months of it rolling out Respect for All Week and all the different planning that's focused on, really building towards social cohesion among students as well too. And so beyond that, we also come up with resources that relate to this issue, mental health. For folks that are language specific, how to report, what is a bias incident, what is a hate crime. I'm going to share that stuff with you because I can only go over so much of it sometime, but all that stuff we have in multiple languages, and we're happy to be able to share that with folks as well too. And the education stuff also includes us going out and speaking. We have a presentation that we actually provide that's called Preventing Hate Together, and that's something that we could do at your forum as well, that goes directly into the what a hate crime is, and a little more structured than me just speaking directly. And so I think that's our education. And the last thing is community relations. And that's sort of our bread and butter. There's 70 organizations I was talking about, right? And all the work that they're doing. I also add that we also provide a community project grants. So we know that some organizations that are smaller, or some communities that might have a unique idea, we can all fight hate. So we provide an opportunity for people to apply up to $10,000 of funding, called a community community project grants. And we work with the city's Commission on Human Rights, and people come up with some pretty amazing stuff, like with relation to their programming, right? And now that grant pipeline is closed right now. However, there's another one that's the OPHC sponsorships, which are sponsored events throughout the city that really focus on fighting hate, right? And fighting and educating the public about what hate crimes are, what bias incidents are. And so I think that we really do end up, wanting to engage with communities to be able to have these sorts of different events throughout the city that really work towards addressing many of these issues. And so I will leave it there because I've talked quite a bit. But I was going to say that in terms of the forum, we love doing those sorts of things, and we are happy to also engage with our city partners who work on issues of stuff that's related to this, like bullying, discrimination, and these matters. I imagine that you're going to have people that are going to have questions about how to report these particular incidents, and the NYPD may not be the authority in that particular area, right? It would be some other city agency. And in those sort of instances, I can bring those agencies to speak on those issues to really provide what the landscape looks like in terms of reporting and where you can report, and then also opportunities for community as well too. And to provide sort of the mental health sort of lens on this, we can also include DOHMH and the Office of Community Mental Health, who we've done resources with before to talk about the impact of hate, but also on resources that are available. There are proposals that have come to us from the community on putting sort of mental health programming together. It's been pretty powerful. A lot of it tends to be like youth coming together, doing circle keeping, engaging in like a sort of how to be able to manage conflict and conversations. It would be great to see that sort of programming really end up sort of making its way into the larger scheme of things. I think that we're really back at that point, right? I think we live in social bubbles in New York City. They don't overlap as much as they should, and people at times may not even know who they live with on their own floor, right, in the city itself. And I think that that dynamic is something that really does. If you don't know who you live in the same building with, are you going to feel entirely safe there, right? And so I think that we try to build that familiarity and that sort of connection and that community is so important. I think it starts with, you know, figuring out what those conversations look like and how we can best facilitate those. I think one of the programs that Mayor Adams had come up with was Breaking Bread Building Bonds, right? Which was this program that brought New Yorkers together from different backgrounds to have conversations on topics that really bring them together, right? Like one of the questions that I bring up all the time is a question that everybody can relate to. When was the time that you felt uncomfortable and why, right? And that is something that, you know, was so powerful to be able to hear the stories of people that are New Yorkers who live so close to you, live closer to me than my mom is way in California, right? And so like, and it really does build a sense of, listen, we are all in it together, right? We have to be able to be supportive of each other, especially during stark circumstances. And so, you know, those are some of the things that like that I find to be very, 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 you know, strong. As well as there's other things we teach. We have upstander trainings as well, in which what do you do in a particular situation if you see something that's happening? What are best practices to be able to engage on it and maintain your safety at the same time in those? And so those are sort of things that we fund, but we also provide programming around. Questions, conversations, please.
Let me ask a question to follow up on the issue of reporting. You found that certain populations, such as the immigrant populations, as mentioned before in Staten Island and elsewhere, are either underreporting or not reporting at all due to their status here in the United States?
Yeah. So there are, so first and foremost, if you are a victim of a crime in New York City, your immigration status doesn't matter to the NYPD. I just want to reiterate that. However, it is not hard, and some people may not be informed, to be in a situation where someone believes that their immigration status could put them in a precarious position with NYPD, right? Like, even though NYPD doesn't do any immigration matters related to stuff when people are victims, but in this situation, like, you know, so, and we've seen situations where there have been people who dressed up like law enforcement. This is one in Jackson Heights, who was going around threatening people, pretending to be an officer of, an ICE officer, right? And that was something that was like, so there are a variety of reasons why people might not feel comfortable, and yes, immigration status is absolutely one of those. What we have is that we've had victims go to organizations, and those organizations have served as credible messengers, and being able to ensure that we can get this facilitation of reporting happening, right? And so that's sort of one.
From anyone else, Barbara?
I think you're absolutely right. It's going to take people of that community on a one-to-one talking to someone and saying, hey, they're really not going to deport you. Because, you say it doesn't matter your status, they're not going to believe it.
Absolutely.
They hear it from someone they trust. It's a matter of trust.
Exactly. And yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think that's why it's important that we work and engage with credible messengers of those communities, right? don't represent every community throughout New York City, right? I'm in New York, I represent mine. I turn to people that represent their own communities to be able to speak for themselves, right? And in certain stuff, I know we're, like I'm a guy. I can't speak for women's issues. I can't speak for these sorts of things. And so, that's why it's important to be able to, work within the bounds you have, but also work with credible messengers, folks who are trained in those positions to be able to work with us. And we're happy to have people like Rabbi Kaplan and others throughout PATH who, are credible messengers for their communities in bringing up these concerns and advocating for their communities' concerns as well, too.
Omar, John, do you have any questions? I'm going to jump in again. Oh, John, please.
No, I was going to say thank you. I found that quite informative. No questions right now, though.
So I'm going to jump in with another question. The issue of social media. What is the impact of social media on the rise of hate? And I'm going to ask the controversial question, and this is through the lens of my own community, the Jewish community. Each community is feeling hate in its own particular way. And sometimes we feel it's exclusively aimed at us. So the Jewish community says only anti-Semitism, or the Asian community says only anti-Asian. How do we, so A, what is the impact of social media? And B, how do we deal with the fact that most communities only see through the lens of their own community?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. And, I think that, one, there has to be, what ends up impacting one of us has literally the ability to impact all of us. And when we're looking towards issues related to hate crimes, related to, divisiveness issues, even social media as a tool itself, right, is something that is really, feeding into this dynamic overall, right? And also separating us from each other, when we all know for a fact that for all of us to be able to eradicate hate, we have to be together, united collectively, and be able to ensure that we're allies to each other too, right? And so in this situation, it's like, social media is a dangerous tool. We've seen the reports. I mean, I think that there's no doubt that it's being used as a tool to be able to push forward some crazy conspiracy theories that are not true, right? That people end up believing, and some folks in some cases have acted on, which is totally unacceptable, right? But it's also something that has been putting some misinformation out there. I worry quite a bit sometimes when an incident happens, someone goes on to their computer and puts in the incident, sees what's coming down, or what Twitter, right? Or what the other social media stuff is saying. And so I think all in all, we have to work towards social media literacy, right? And that is something that I've spoken to a few folks about. I'd be interested to see what other people have to say. We cannot take on these large social media companies, obviously. I think that there's something but we can set sort of guidelines in terms of how to be able to vet for information and what's misinformation itself. And then we have to be able to go back to the fact that this is a democracy. And what makes this country something amazing is that we've all are here, have come here for a variety of reasons, but we're afforded something that, is pretty unique. It is that these rights that we have, right? It's just something that my family came from Pakistan, and this is my perspective. The circumstances, and half my family, they're minorities in Pakistan. The protection of those rights are so important for us to be able to be a working democracy for everyone. And that is something I think is extremely important for everyone to realize. For our governance to matter, for our governance to be able to be united and consistent, we have to be able to be there for each other at that basis. And so I think it's also our responsibility, right, to be able to figure out what that looks like. Listen, I went to college, I did all this stuff. but that means nothing if I'm not talking to someone like my neighbor and just building a relationship with them, right? And the first time I moved in, I went down, I met my neighbors, and they were like, "This guy is too excited." But I'm like, "Listen, I live here. We live here. This is our livelihood. Like, you know, I'm down to, like, get to know each other a bit more." But those are sort of the basic things that I think we've lost over time too, especially with sort of like, and this is in my perspective, but even people can sort of stay behind social media rather than engage with people directly um in like a way that's dignified, right? A way that has a means of like dignity. And now it seems that folks can hide behind social media and utilize it as a tool as well.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Any other questions? Again, Omar, Barbara, any other additional thoughts or questions? Okay.
Yeah, so I was going to say, however you all want to move forward with the form, I think that where I can help you with is if you want to bring a number of people from from our various city agencies that work on whatever issues you're talking about, where the intersection is, I can bring those people as part of it. I think it'd be really informative.
Really appreciate that. I think certainly people from DOHMH talk about
NYPD.
that, NYPD, and certainly, and
the DA's office.
Yeah, the DAs and the HPDs and all the other offices that, between you and me, I think we have enough connections in the CCHR and the Commission on Human Rights. So that would be really extremely helpful. I will tell you why. I just wanted to tell you one thing, Hassan, you should know, and everyone else. Many people, and you used the word before, dignity, the violation of dignity in case of hate crimes is probably one of the hugest issues that is not addressed and often not resolved. When one's dignity is violated, the dignity of both their personal narrative, their communal narrative, their spiritual narrative, one loses trust, as you said before, in everyone around them. And there's an author that I'm very familiar with, and she's actually become a dear friend. Her name is Donna Hicks, and she has written some of the most seminal works on dignity. And what we are going to be doing, Hassan, you should know, we will be bringing her in, when we say we, the JCRC, through our Center for a Shared Society, and it's going to be part of our path
oh, wow.
as well.
Okay.
He's agreed to do an all-day seminar to train dignity ambassadors in New York. So we're going to hopefully have 25 to 30 folks being really trained in dignity, the skills of dignity. I was talking to a group today, again from the state level. They wanted to do a love rally. I said, no one, I don't think anyone's loving each other right now, but people need skills. They need skills on how to navigate all this stuff. So we're hoping to bring in Donna Hicks for a day. We'll invite folks from the PATH Partnership, alumni from our We Are Brooklyn Fellowship Against Hate. We'll be kicking off, by the way, our Bronx Fellowship Against Hate in the next few weeks. We're really excited about that. And being able to honor the dignity of another human being is a tremendous skill. And being able to repair the violation of the dignity, when you've violated somebody's dignity, is just an incredible skill as well, and one that I think would really help our society in a tremendous way. So I want to thank you for being with us tonight.
Absolutely.
We don't have enough of a forum here right now, to pick the dates as we had on our original agenda. We will get back to that. But again, Hassan, thank you so much. And
no, thank you so much. I appreciate
some other
it.
issues as well. Okay?
Yes, and then I will send out the information that I had mentioned earlier, and you're welcome to pass those out too. Okay, thank you.
And as they say, go home. Go home.
I know I'm still at work. Okay, I'm gonna go. Okay, bye.
All right. Take it easy, Hassan. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hassan's really a remarkable human being and spends his days and his nights a little bit later than he probably should, although we're sitting here right now ourselves, doing the work for coordinating for the mayor. His office, he says, is 2 people. It's supposed to be 5, but there's a hiring freeze on right now. So God willing, that hiring freeze will end. So as I mentioned before, we don't have as many people that normally come to our meetings. I'm going to blame it on the cold and the fact that we didn't have a meeting last night. I guess people think that things have been extended to the rest of the week. I know that I want to thank Omar and certainly Barbara and, of course, John for being here. Steve Fruit, unfortunately, had a real another obligation that he needed to take care of this evening. So we will reconvene in March, and at that point in time, do some real planning, because I'd really like to get a date set for this forum. The offers that Hassan just made of bringing, and he has the authorization to do it in the city as well. He's been chosen by the mayor to coordinate all these kinds of efforts in the city, reaching out to DOHMH for the health issues and NYPD. I think we can really do an incredible job of informing our community, Community Board 8, about this, and we can invite the other community boards in the Bronx as well. I'd be more than happy to do that and work with Ciara over at the Borough President's office. But I'm going to put out, I'm going to make a motion that, well, we really can't make it because we don't have a quorum, but I just want to thank you all for being on, and we're going to cut it short. As I announced before, I got in at 4:10 this morning. I'm a little tired. My brain is working on a little bit slow basis. So I want to thank you all for being with us tonight. And again, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
All right.